You were talking about the smoke stick. I've got caption 4 up.
Yeah, so the smoke wand that teams used to use or manufacturers used to use in their wind tunnel was more of a commercialised thing now. But instead now they use what's called particle image velocimetry, and it's basically that you use lasers to do that same thing.
If it's lasers, it has to be advanced. This is what I've learned from watching TV.
Anything else on Mercedes? Because we do have a short interview coming up after you finish Mercedes before we go on to the rest of the grid.
Okay, so there's just a couple of quick things to go through. So number 5's image is their new turning vanes, which was introduced alongside the new pointy nose that they came out with. And basically that's just got a few extra slots in it. It's just showing the complexity of the Mercedes and how that compares with everybody else.
When you say it's a turning vane, does that mean it only comes into effect in the corners, or?
No, that's just its name. That's just what we in the tech community call it, a turning vane. Obviously, you've got other things like barge boards, etc., and you can't call them all a barge board, or
Fair enough.
Some people do. So yeah, we call those that fit underneath the chassis a turning vane.
Right. So I see that they're also slotted in addition to turning, and it looks like it's by the front suspension.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And is that to help it get to the brake ducts, or to help get it underneath the car, or what again, I'm just curious as to the what you think the purpose of that might be. Yeah.
Yeah, so the turning vanes take airflow from underneath the nose, and they help to reshape the Y250 vortex, which is the vortex that's shed from the front main plane juncture with the flapped region. And obviously that's turns in a certain way, but it loses energy as it moves down the car. The turning vanes help to re-energize that and will recondition that vortex to improve flow downstream.
Right. Now, and that's interesting because I've read elsewhere that a vortex is also a source of drag, very much a source of drag. So it's interesting to me that they want to re-energize it. Is that because they use the kinetic energy of the vortex further downstream to help with the aero coming off the back of the car?
It's more to do with controlling the area around the floor and the front of the side pod. So it's all about creating a better energy around the car to improve performance downstream.
Okay. All right. I can live with that. And also, I see you've got a picture of Mercedes, and this perhaps says everything, being the only team on a grid using brake warming covers. What do you suppose that is about?
Yeah, so basically they're the only team that we've seen so far since Italy last season, when the new regulations came in to allow Pirelli to take tyre pressure measurements on the grid. They're the only team to use these covers, and basically they help to increase the temperature within the brake cake tin itself. So they'll obviously control temperature of not only the brakes but also the tyres. And obviously, as discussions that we've had over the recent podcasts, we know how critical tyre temperatures are with the Pirellis. We also know that all the teams are trying to mitigate the problems that they're having with those temperatures and pressures.
Right. And it's also important to note that it looks like someone's knitted a nice scarf for the front wing while they were at it, in addition to the brake warmers. So,
do you mind if I move it along? Firstly, there was a comment in the chat from a guest, 1506, saying he started listening to the podcast 3 weeks ago and he absolutely loves it, and stuff like that really keeps us going. So any feedback is fantastic. People have been contacting me and having email conversations with me using the Contact Us form on spannersready.com. Click the contact tab. Actually, that's a really good way to get my attention and for stuff you want read out on the show. So it's been great listening to people doing that. We put out a Q&A question, and Matt Summerfield there got a question from Twitter that I might want to pose to him because I know it fits in with his next slide. So, in your opinion, here we go. This is what is referred to, some people on the internet call Hamilton fans Hamfosi, and I believe that is a hate word. That is not a term I would like to encourage, but nevertheless, someone has called himself Hamfosi on Twitter and said, was Rosberg in the wrong engine mode by mistake? Or was it deliberately done? And what advantage did it give him? And I'm going to go to a slide of Nico Rosberg's steering wheel.
As we discuss the STRAT mode heard round the world.
So shall I quickly explain what went on first?
Do it, man.
Yes, please.
Okay. So on the formation lap, leading up to the grid, the drivers obviously have a set of procedures that they need to follow in order to prime the car so that they're ready for race. Lewis Hamilton obviously did what he's used to doing, whereas Nico Rosberg, who has actually got stickers on the side of his steering wheel cueing him to do these things, made a mistake. And he didn't reset his STRAT mode. So there's a rotary on the bottom left hand of the steering wheel, which I've circled in the picture, and that's the strategy mode, which is basically what kind of energy recovery is going on with the car and how much fuel, etc., is being used. It's all to do with how much you're turning the power up, basically.
So did he get an advantage from off the line from being in that mode?
It's difficult to say because obviously there's 14 different STRAT modes on that rotary, and each one of them is going to do something very different. Now, the biggest thing that he might have gained an advantage from is that in that STRAT mode, it sort of gives you maximum energy recovery from the MGUK. So he could have just thrown it in the corner and picked up the energy from that.
Oh man, I can't wait to listen back to that. But I genuinely didn't follow it. Trumpets, did you follow that?
Yeah, I did, and I had a similar kind of wonderment because he very much seemed to state after the race in an interview, I think it was on Sky that I saw, that it was not his mistake, that he had put the car into the correct STRAT mode, and that for some reason it didn't actually go into the STRAT mode, even though he moved the dial. Maybe, I'm not sure. He didn't elaborate at all. But he seemed to be representing that it was not his mistake, that it was an issue with the car, which I know as a driver is probably your number one go-to excuse for everything. It's not me, it's the instrument. My valve stuck. Yeah, I know.
But that probably makes more sense because, what was it, more than 100 horsepower down, Rosberg was coming out of turn 3 than Lewis or something like that. Something that was 17 kilometers an hour, I know, was the speed.
And I think it's important to note too that he was in the correct race start mode, and that race start mode overrides everything else on the car for a set period of time. There are specific regulations about how much and when you can recover energy, et cetera, and so on. And the race start mode ensures that you adhere to them.